Hey everyone, SunTide here. Hope you all are doing great. I definitely am because I just finished going through the new meta builds for Monster Hunter Wilds TU2. And honestly, genuinely, the builds are pretty cool and pretty interesting. We're using a lot of different set bonuses, or we have the chance to use different set bonuses, which is nice. I like being able to change your build for different gameplays and different playstyles and stuff like that. So yeah, way different to what I initially had thought when I went through the new pieces and weapons. So yeah, let's get to it, but quickly let's talk about what's new and what was introduced in TU2. So we had a lot of different things. We had new Lagiacrus armor, and these armor pieces have some very good skills in Max Might, Latent Power, and Weapons Exploit, along with a decent set bonus that just gives you some affinity and some extra damage props. We have the Seregios armor, which has some great skills as well. So you have Counter-Strike and Adrenaline Rush, along with another set bonus that isn't great either. It just boosts Adrenaline Rush's power a tiny bit. Both set bonuses are fine, they just aren't amazing. We also had some really good weapons though, so the Lagiacrus weapons are very, very good. And they have a nice skill that boosts Thunder Attack based on Thunder Res. The other weapon set are the Seregios weapons. So these weapons are by default a bit weak, but their special skill is a bit stronger, so it just gives you extra damage by giving you this sort of special sharpness or special ammo for the ranged weapons. Meanwhile, we also got some nice talismans. So we got Adrenaline Rush 3 and Elemental Absorption 2, which is nice for damage, along with Heroics 4 and Wide Range for quality of life / defensive stuff. So yeah, lots of cool stuff, and a lot of them are going to be used for our builds. So the main categories of builds are, we're going to go through some standard sets that use Max Might, Weapons Exploit, and other affinity skills. So we're going to go through a base build for that, like just a general Max Raw build. We're going to go through a build that uses Azure Bolt 1, and we're going to go through a build that has free 1 slots, which I call a Quick Sheathe build because that's the one I use for Longsword, but other builds can use it too if they want more 1 slots. For example, if you want to use Thunder Resistance for more damage with your Lackey weapons. Then we're going to go and talk about Adrenaline Rush sets. So one that's a base set that doesn't use Razor's Edge, so the Seregios set bonus, and one that does use Seregios set bonus. And then we're going to talk about how to use the Laggy weapons properly and how to adapt the sets to work for Laggy weapons. Talk about Thunder Res, and talk about how we can make our builds work against Uth Duna, which is the upcoming Arch-Tempered monster, so it's going to be our hardest challenge yet, and we're going to make our build specific for that. And then we'll end off with a tiny bit about Fortify sets that are going to help you survive and make sure you clear the fight as easily and also as quickly as possible. So yes, some quick notes before we get too deep into it. So what happened here is that armor optimization is independent of weapon optimization. Basically, what that means is the main things I'm going to show off here are going to be the armor builds. Change the weapon builds as you wish depending on your playstyle. So I'm showing the already weapons for simplicity, but oftentimes other weapons are going to be better, so you can use the Lagiacrus weapons instead, which are going to be a bit better a lot of the time because of the high electric damage, and you can change your skills as you need it. So if you need more sharpness, put in more sharpness. If you don't need sharpness, take off the sharpness. Okay? So yes, so there's that. This is basically going to be the uptimes I'm going to assume for most of your skills in most of your situations. So I put all of these into some Python script that does the math for us. So there's that. This is true unless otherwise stated. There are some builds that don't use Max Might. Now, as for the new set bonuses, so for Azure Bolt 1, which is the Lagiacrus set bonus, so this skill has 20 seconds of uptime, 30 seconds of downtime, and when you do enough damage, you get bonuses to affinity. I basically assume you're going to need about 15 or 20 seconds to reactivate it between each time, so that gives you about a 30% uptime, which I think is reasonable. As for Razor's Edge, the Seregios set bonus, that one's a bit more complicated. So basically what that skill does is it changes Adrenaline Rush's uptime from 30 seconds to 45 seconds, and if you can activate it again, it goes up to 60 seconds. So how I've mathed that out, basically I assume that you're either going to increase your uptime by 50%, by 1.5 times. So say the skill was going to be up for 30% of the time, now I'm going to say it's going to be up for 45% of the time. Okay? Otherwise, I assume that the downtime is halved. So what I mean by that is, say the skill is up 80% of the time, because we're really good at getting the skill off. Now, instead of having 20% of the time it's off, I'm going to assume it's going to be off 10% of the time instead. Okay, those are sort of the two ways, and they equate out at around 50% uptime. So when you get 50% uptime, it'll go up to 75% uptime with Razor's Edge 1, and that's going to be the same for both situations. Okay, so that's Razor's Edge 1. Now, let's talk about the builds. Okay, now let's say you just want to boost your raw damage as high as possible. If you want to do that, this is the build you're going to want to use now. It's going to be ever so slightly better than what we had before. So you're going to use the AT Ray Dow pieces for the helm, braces, and coil, which gets you Guts Tenacity. Very nice damage bonus. You're going to want to use the Numinous Shroud Beta on the chest, and the Lagiacrus Greaves on the legs. And because the Lagiacrus Greaves are ever so slightly more efficient than the Numinous Greaves, it's going to give you about a 0.5% damage bonus. Not very much at all, but it is technically something. So, yeah. Now, in practice, I would still prefer the Numinous Greaves set, because that gives you the Xerxia set bonus just in general. However, there is one more new set which I would recommend actually for more damage, and that's going to be this one. So this set uses two Lagiacrus pieces, so the male and the Greaves. The Lagiacrus male is slightly less efficient than the Xerxia male. However, what it gets instead is it activates your set bonus Azure Bolt 1. And this is very good. So this is actually a set I have equipped right now, so this is what it's going to look like. And what Azure Bolt does is it's going to intermittently give you a nice burst of damage and give you a nice burst of infinity. So the damage is going to pop off. It pops up when you do about 125 damage. So there it is. Right now it did 2.8 extra damage. That's actually going to be 30 actual damage plus some thunder damage. And in practice, that's going to be way more damage even in like bad situations. You know, even the monster is perfectly thunder immune, say you only get like 5 procs in a hunt, that's going to be 5 times 30 damage or 150 damage, which is going to be 0.5% of the damage, more than 0.5% of the damage, if a monster has less than 30,000 HP, which very few monsters do. I'm not sure if any monsters do. So, yes, for pure damage, this is going to be the set you're going to want to use. I'll put that on screen again. And so the other cool thing about this is it does give you 2 free 1 slots, which you can put on to get Thunder Res 2. And the Thunder Res 2, you actually get 42 Thunder Res after you eat, which is crazy. So every one of these pieces gives you 4 Thunder Res, so this is like actually the max Thunder Res you can get from armor alone. So that's going to be 20 Thunder Res plus 12 from Thunder Resistance plus 10 from eating. That's 42 Thunder Res, which if you use the Lagiacrus weapons, which boost Thunder attack based on your Thunder Res, is going to be very, very, very strong. I'll talk more about Lagiacrus weapons later, but basically this is going to be your best general use damage build for most weapons. The Longsword or other people who want more 1 slots are going to use something a bit different, so the build for that is going to be the one I have on screen right now. Ever so slightly different. We're going to use the Lagiacrus coil and Lagiacrus Greaves along with the AT Ray Dow chest pieces. Basically, this will give you an extra 1 slot. You're going to lose a tiny bit of extra damage, but the extra 1 slot will let you use Quick Sheathe 3 or another point of Thunder Res if that's what you want. One other interesting thing is you actually get an extra 2 slot, which is unused, and you can use that for a lot of different things. If you use Quick Sheathe 3, you can use it for Thunder Res, which can help boost the damage of your Lagiacrus weapons. You can boost Evade Extender 2 to Evade Extender 3, which is very nice. It improves your rolling distance by a lot. Personally, I use it for Part Breaker. It's not necessarily good, I just like breaking parts, so there's that. You can also use it for Ambush or Tool Specialist or whatever you want instead, so you have options. Alternatively, if you like Agitator more, you can use an Agitator Talisman instead. This basically trades 1 Max Might for 1 Agitator. You also lose the 2 slot, but that's an option as well if you really like getting as much Agitator as possible. So, yes, you have some options, but this is going to be your general Quick Sheath Longsword setup. Okay, so, most of those builds are going to be very good for most weapons, most of the time. However, if you like to roll a lot, or you can't keep the skill maximum might up, then you're probably going to want to use the skill Adrenaline Rush. And Adrenaline Rush is the very good skill that boosts your damage if you can roll and attack perfectly at the right time. It's very nice for people like Dual Blades or whoever else who like to roll a lot and can't keep max might up. Now, if you're very good at keeping Adrenaline Rush up, then the build you're going to want to use is going to be the one you see on screen right now. Now, this may surprise you. We are using the Lagiacrus set bonus. We're actually using the exact same build as we had last time, and we are not using the new Seregios set bonus, which boosts the power of Adrenaline Rush. And I think that's pretty interesting, and it's a pretty interesting quirk of just how Adrenaline Rush and uptime works. Basically, all the skill does, all Seregios Tenacity does, is it boosts the duration of Adrenaline Rush from 30 seconds to 60 seconds. Okay, it doubles the duration. But in practice, if you are very good at keeping Adrenaline Rush up anyway, let's say you waste 5 seconds to get the skill up, instead of wasting 5 seconds every 30 seconds, you're wasting 5 seconds every 60 seconds, which is nice, but basically all Seregios' Tenacity does is it reduces that 5 seconds. It basically is only active for 5 seconds every minute, is what Seregios' Tenacity would do in this situation. It's not really helping you, at all, really. So, yeah, if you're very good at Adrenaline Rush, you don't want Seregios' Tenacity. However, if you're less good at Adrenaline Rush, it ends up being a bit better. In addition to that, the Azure Bolt set bonus in particular also gives you extra affinity. And if you don't have max smite, then the extra affinity is going to be a bit more appreciated. I mean, think about it this way. Affinity is your crit rate, and that makes raw damage stronger. Adrenaline Rush is raw damage. So really, any affinity boosting skill boosts the power of Adrenaline Rush. And arguably more than Seregios' Tenacity does, Razor's Edge. That being said, Razor's Edge 2 does give you a nice raw bonus, 5% extra raw if you activate Adrenaline Rush twice within the duration. However, AT Rate Out set bonus, Guts Tenacity, also gives you 5% raw, but this is active all the time. So yeah, and you can't have both. So Guts Tenacity is just way better than Razor's Edge 2. Razor's Edge 1 is going to be worse than Azure Bolt 1 if you are very good at Adrenaline Rush. However, if you are less good at Adrenaline Rush, then you do have other options. You can use the Seregios set bonus, and if you do really want to, this is what you're going to use. So you're going to use the Regios Fan Braces and the Regios Grease. This is best if you do usually have around 50% uptime, so if it takes around 30 seconds to get this skill up again. But even then, it's only going to be like a side grade, and it's usually going to be worse, okay? Now, the reason for that is going to be the low affinity, so you may be thinking, hey, this is a good low affinity weapon, well, a good high affinity weapon in the new Seregios weapons, but that's not going to work well either. The reason for that is basically that those skills work best if you are very, very, very good at rolling and keeping high uptime. And if you're very good at keeping high uptime, then again, you don't want the Seregios set bonus. So it's weird. The Seregios armor set bonus is good if you are mediocre or okay at rolling, and the weapons are good if you are very good at rolling. So, they're good in different situations. And there's never going to be a situation where you're going to want to use both, which is a bit sad. That being said, though, this build does have a couple of things cool about it, though. So, one is that because of the Raid Out set pieces, you actually already have 3 max smite. It's useless if you don't use it, but it can be very good. It has 3 max smite for free. It also has 3 1 slots, so if you want to use the dual blades with Thunder Res, you can. However, the longsworders can also use it. And in reality, this set is actually really, really good if you can make use of both the Map Smite and Adrenaline Rush. People like the longsword, but also people like the great sword or the switch axe, which can roll to get activate Adrenaline Rush, and then go full in on the attacks once Max Smite activates. So, yeah, this build actually becomes very good for non-dual bladers that can use Max Smite. In practice, if you can get Max Smite to be up more than around 30% of the time before Seregios' Tenacity, then it becomes optimal for the longsword, 40% uptime for other weapons. So, yeah, if you can activate the skill, once a minute, then you want to use this build instead. And I think that's valid for actually a lot of different weapons, a lot of different playstyles, You are going to roll sometimes, and when you do roll, if you roll an attack, then you get a massive bonus to your attack for 45 seconds, which is very good. So, yeah, genuinely, Seregios' Tenacity for non-dual blade weapons is actually very strong. Especially longsword, but also things like the great sword or switch axe, which roll and can't block and use offensive guard. So, yeah, very cool set bonus. Okay, so those are going to be the main armor sets we're going to talk about today. So we have the ones that are nice for high affinity with Max Smite, and some that are very nice for Adrenaline Rush. However, there is still a very cool weapon that is very much worth talking about and trying to optimize for, and that's the new Lagiacrus weapons. And their new cool skill, Convert Thunder Distance, which gives us high Thunder attack based on our Thunder Res. Now, this is not going to be a full element video, that will still come, but there are important things we do need to make sure we're all on the same page about. So one, no matter how hard you optimize for element damage, raw will still be most of your damage, so you can never neglect raw. 2. Fast weapons and fast attacks generally do more element damage, so dual blades are going to be doing more element damage than the hammer or hunting horn. 3. Despite that, the slower weapons, like the greatsword, hammer, and hunting horn, tend to have higher element stats. And 4, there is an element cap based upon your weapon's element stat. Okay? Just those are the important things to know about and make sure we're all on the same page for. Okay, so let's talk about the Lagiacrus weapons. So, the thing is that when you have very high raw builds, we use the Azure build we talked about earlier, you actually have very high thunder res, and thus very, very high element. So this build by default has 40 thunder, but right now, in our full-on raw maximized optimized build, we already have 42 thunder res, which means that we're getting an extra 16.8 or 17 thunder damage. The values you see on screen are multiplied by 10, so it is up to 568 when it's really 56.8. Okay? That and a burst is a very nice raw skill that also gives us nice element. And when burst is activated, and I just attack the monster a couple of times, then you're going to see that my element stat is already going to be very, very high. I go all the way up to 62.8, which is crazy, which is very, very, very good. Okay, so in our full-on raw optimized build, we already have 63 or so thunder. And if I put on a single thunder attack, I actually already cap thunder. I hit the maximum thunder damage I could do already. Okay, so yes, basically the Lagiacrus weapons are very good if a monster is at all thunder weak. But how good they are is very weapon dependent and very monster dependent. Okay? But in general, compared to the raw weapons, Lagiacrus weapons just a tiny bit of raw, but gain this absolutely massive amount of element, massive amount of thunder damage. Especially if we're using a build that has high thunder res like this max raw one, and so it becomes a very strong weapon for all weapon types versus very many monsters. However, trading in more raw to get even more element usually isn't going to be worth it. The base element is enough, getting any more is often not going to be worth it. So, take for example Uth Duna, very prescient example because of the new Uth Duna. So its best weak point is going to be the forelegs, which have 65 raw weak points, hit zones, and 15 thunder hit zones. The longsword, its best combo is going to be the Spirit Blade one and the Crimson Slasher one, which does 80 raw damage, 2 element motion value. So we can figure out how effective a point of element is versus a point of raw is, and it's about 0.577 effective raw is going to be 1 effective element. Basically, if we have 2 elements, that's going to be better than 1 raw. That's our general trade-off for the longsword. Other weapons are going to be different. We'll talk about them more later on. These are just some other comparisons. So in reality, an element is worth 1.15 effective element. Raw is going to be worth 1.7 effective raw. Point of crit boost is going to be worth 8 effective raw. Okay, so what this basically means, though, is that none of the trade-offs are worth getting more element for. So, for example, a crit boost is worth 8 effective raw. Effective raw is going to be worth 2 effective element. So we need to get 16 or 160 visible thunder attack if we replace 1 point of crit boost, which is never going to happen. Okay, we are not going to get 160 visible thunder for 1 point of crit boost. Okay, that's not what Thunder Attack 1 does. None of the trade-offs are going to be worth getting more element for against Uth Duna for the longsword. That being said, the very high base element is going to be very worth it. If I use the Lagiacrus weapons and I go full on raw, I get crit boost 5, attack boost 1, I only lose 8 effective raw, but I gain 68 effective element, as we saw, okay? And we said 8 raw is worth 16 element, so we're getting this sort of extra, like, 52 element for free. Overall, that's something like a 7% damage bonus for a very raw-focused weapon like the longsword is right now, especially post-nerf. Okay? So, even then, we love the very high, nice base element bonus, but we don't need any more because the trade-offs are not worth it. Okay? And that's going to be true for the longsword, and is generally true for most or really all other raw-focused weapons. Okay? The general principle is you go your full max raw set, which is going to be 2 laggy, 3 AT ray. That's already max raw and just happens to have insane thunder res. change weapon decorations to taste, depending on what you want to use, especially because a lot of laggy weapons have very nice decorations already. And then if we want to, we use all our leftover 1 slots for Thunder Res and boost our Thunder Attack that way for free. That's going to be true for most role-focused weapons. What I found surprising is that even the Greatsword, if all you do is the True Charge Slash, and that's all you do, you actually do more Thunder Attack than you do with the Longsword, just because the numbers are higher on the Greatsword. So, yeah, every raw weapon appreciates Lagiacrus weapons, but generally does not want to get any more Thunder Attack than is necessary. You don't want to trade raw attack, you just want the very nice free Thunder Attack you get from the weapon. But yeah, there are some exceptions. The main one is going to be the Dual Blades. So the Dual Blades have a very high element ratios on their attacks. So in the case of Dual Blades, 1 point of effective element is going to be worth 1.7 effective raw. So for pure damage, Thunder Attack is their highest priority. And this caps your element damage, so you don't need to change your armor set at all. So there's that. Element Gun Lance is the same. Element Gun Lance has insanely high element ratios. So yeah. But really, those are the main ones that want Thunder Attack 3. Other fast weapons like the Sword and Shield or the Intake Glaive might want 1 or 2 points of Thunder Attack, but in general, you're going to want the free Thunder Attack and nothing else. Okay? So your quick summary for the Laggy weapons is, use Laggy weapons against Thunder Weak monsters like Uth Duna. You can put on your general quality of life or raw damage skills after that. However, Dual Blades and Elemental Gun Lance want Thunder Attack 3, and maybe you want to use Thunder Attack 1 or 2 for the Sword and Shield or Insect Glaive. It's very equal to getting crit boost in this case. Okay? So, yeah, that is my laggy weapon summary. Now, the one last thing I do want to get to is, speaking of Uth Duna, at least versus AT Ray Dow, I really appreciated having a defensive Fortify set. It basically just made sure I didn't die, I could heal up faster. If I could heal up faster, I could get into the fight much faster. And in addition to that, if you don't know by now, when you cart, you can change to a Fortify set and keep the Fortified bonus. Okay? So in practice, you just use a normal set. When you cart, you swap to a Fortify set. After one cart, your damage is going to be basically the same thing, but you'll have a nice defensive and utility bonus. After a second cart, you'll actually be doing more damage than you were in the first cart, and you'll have way more survivability. And so it becomes very worth getting a nice Fortify defensive set. And so these have also changed ever so slightly. So how they've changed, basically, you have the new Lagiacrus helm, which is very efficient for defense. Now, if you do this, you actually become immune to Water Blight as well after eating, which is very cool. You're also immune to Ice Blight, and you will be immune to Thunder Blight if you use a Thunder Resistance skill point, which you probably will if you use Lagiacrus weapons. So, yeah, you're immune to 3 different Blights. Again, use Laggy weapons against Uth Duna, and make sure you do your War Cry to victory to make sure you get a nice damage bonus because you have War Cry. So, yeah. And with that, I think that is all our builds we're going to talk about today. So a quick summary is that, in general, your best build is going to be 2 Laggy, 3 AT Ray. That gives you max raw and also insanely high Thunder Res, which is very good with the Laggy weapons. Alternatively, you can go 2 Seregios and 3 AT Ray if you dodge a bit, but if you dodge too little or too much, you want to use the Lagiacrus AT Ray Dow sets. Finally, Fortify builds have been slightly improved by the Lagiacrus helm, and with laggy weapons, it'll really help against AT Uth Duna. So try that if you have trouble. I definitely will. And yeah, with that, I think we are done. Thanks so much for watching and sticking to the end. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters and everyone else watching as well. For the next week and a half, I will be not here. I'll be on a flight for work. Well, I'll get on a flight for work tomorrow, and then I'll be off. So I'll be back then. I will possibly, hopefully, go through unofficial patch notes and post that to my Patreon. I will not have a video out until I come back. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. And yeah, bye.